The Angel Medina case begins with a simple question. What happened to the money from a nationwide insurance settlement tied to roof work at the door in El Paso? That question led to private meetings, recorded threats, Angel Medina's removal from ministry, a fight over a church building in Fabens, court action, and a public campaign by his family after they say they were shut out and excommunicated.
He's a Jewish crusader. He's anti-Christian Jewish crusader. That's what Mr. Ross is.
People are held captive. They're held in fear.
To watch Greg Mitchell weave his so-called magic.
Worldwide franchise of Potter's Houses and Victory Chapels. Wayman Mitchell is founder and chairman of the board.
Welcome back to another episode of the Potter's House Cult YouTube channel. This is episode 5. In this episode, I'm tracing the Angel Medina case from the first questions about the insurance money to the meetings, the recordings, the church emails, the building dispute, and the court record that followed. Some parts of this story are documented in recordings, messages, emails, and court filings. Other parts come from Angel Medina, his family, and the people supporting them. To understand why this conflict became so serious, you first have to understand who Angel Medina was inside the door. He was the pastor of the Door Church in Fabens, Texas, launched out of the El Paso church by Pastor Paul Stevens. Angel Medina was born in El Paso on May 26, 1970. Ruth Medina, born Ruth Garola, was born there on August 13, 1968. Their early lives, as described by the family, were rough. Angel's father died when he was 8. Their story includes gangs, alcohol, drugs, violence, jail, and years of instability before either of them converted. From there, Angel's family describes a long ministry path inside the fellowship. He became a pastor in 2006. He and Ruth moved to San Jose Miahuatlan in Puebla, Mexico to pioneer a church. In 2009, they moved again, this time to La Paz, Bolivia, to pioneer another church. In 2014, they returned to El Paso, where Angel briefly took over a West Side church before returning to the mother church for redirection. From 2017 through 2022, he continued evangelizing. Then in 2022, Angel and Ruth opened a church in Fabens, Texas. That Fabens church later became the center of a second fight, the building fight. But before that came the roof dispute. By early 2023, Angel Medina and people close to him were asking questions about an insurance settlement connected to roof work at the door in El Paso. The core allegation, according to online sources and family accounts, was that the church had received more than $1 million from Nationwide for a full roof replacement, but had not used all of that money for that purpose. The figure repeated by Angel's side was about $400,000. One later summary goes further. It says the church first approached a reputable roofing contractor, that the contractor refused to participate after being asked to manipulate or inflate invoices, and that leadership then worked with a man referred to as Toby, while George Lopez acted as general contractor. Angel Medina's own written response places the first major confrontation on May 11, 2023. He says he met with Paul Stevens after speaking with George Lopez about the claim, the settlement amount, the details of the claim, and an email that had been circulating mentioning fraud. According to Angel, Paul said the settlement money had been used for roof repair. He emphasized repair. He also said invoices and proof of payment existed and could be reviewed. Angel says that the answer was enough, at least for the moment, that he followed up by email, thanked Paul for the meeting, and said things seemed clarified, but still asked to review the invoices Paul had mentioned. That brought them to the next meeting on May 18th. Angel says he arrived expecting to see paperwork. Instead, he found the church council waiting for him. He names Juan Baquera, Kofi Salar, Richard Contreras, and Paul Stevens. In Angel's account, the tone had changed completely. This was no longer a discussion about invoices. It was now about him. He says Kofi Salar kept pointing at him and reframing the issue as a problem with his heart. He also says that in this meeting, Paul Stevens acknowledged that he had kept money from the settlement, even though at the earlier meeting he had denied wrongdoing. Angel treated that as a confession. He says leadership then told him he was accusing an elder without witnesses or proof, and that unless he produced legitimate documentation from Nationwide, his accusation would not be treated as credible and he would be removed from ministry. That point is important. Angel says he was not told, let's put the paperwork on the table. He says he was told, in effect, that the burden had shifted to him, and that if he could not satisfy it on their terms, the cost would be his ministry. Angel says he did not stop there. He says he later sent the council a conversation with the Texas Department of Insurance and a clause on the principle of indemnification from an insurance textbook. He says he suggested bringing in Nationwide itself or other experts to settle the issue. According to him, that was refused. He says Kofi Salar, Paul Stevens, and the council insisted on documentation from Nationwide while dismissing what he had already supplied. That is the broad outline Angel gives in writing. The recordings that were later posted publicly were used to support that outline. In one clip attributed to Paul Stevens, he says this to Angel.
You're going to be the one who loses, Angel, not me. Angel, I have the credibility, you don't. I have the support of my church and leaders and my staff and the council. You don't have that kind of support, Angel. You're going to crash and burn. That's what's going to happen.
In another clip attributed to Paul Stevens, he says,
You don't have a very good reputation in this church, and you've needed my platform validation in order to support you and get people to continue to give.
In another,
If you go down that road, you're going to lose, Angel. It won't end well for you and your family.
there is also a clip in which Paul Stevens appears to frame the matter spiritually instead of legally. In that clip, he says,
And the scripture even says, before you go to law, better just to leave things rather than take some church dispute to the law and leave it to God. Some things you have to leave to God.
Those clips show how the dispute was being handled. Not by opening records, not by producing the insurance file, not by showing the invoices and ending the matter. The argument, at least in those clips, is what Angel stands to lose if he keeps pushing. Other recordings posted by Angel's side were meant to reinforce the money question itself. In one clip attributed to Pastor Ernesto, also called Ernie Alonso Lopez, he says,
We didn't do this maliciously. We didn't do this. We thought, just like if I get my car wrecked and I'm able to find a body shop that will do it cheaper, and I'm able to pocket $300, I don't think that's bad. Chevy will do it for this much, and Toby will do it for this much, and I'm able to get the $300.
The caption attached to that clip interprets the statement as an admission that church leadership believed it was acceptable to keep part of the insurance money if the work could not be done more cheaply. That interpretation belongs to the caption. Still, the clip is important because it shows at least one insider explaining the matter in exactly those terms. Then there are the Joe Stevens clips. Joe, Paul Stevens' son, says in one clip,
I just heard that, they got him over $1 million and that the El Paso church was going to be able to keep 400, that George Lopez was doing the patch. I just remember back then, my dad was always on George's case because it was leaking everywhere still.
In another,
My understanding was the insurance company was paying them for a roof replacement.
Yeah, they did a repair job.
They did a repair, which is illegal.
in a third,
If the insurance paperwork says replace, they're going to owe $1 million back to the full amount back to the insurance company.
Again, those clips do not settle the case. What they do is show that Angel was not the only one connected to the church who was speaking about the roof in these terms. According to Angel's written response, the third decisive meeting took place on June 6, 2023. He says that despite everything he had already submitted, including the TDI material, he was told he would be removed from ministry because the issue was still being treated as a problem with his heart. Angel's position is clear in his response. He says he had not committed immorality, crime, or doctrinal error. He says he had confronted Paul Stevens over the insurance claim and the settlement money. In his view, that did not justify removal from ministry, and he challenged leadership to provide biblical grounds if they believed otherwise. He also says that at some point during this period, Paul Stevens told him in recorded words, "You have crossed the line and you are done." Later public captions describe his final meeting as a firing squad. They say he was told he was not welcome back. One post says there was no reconciliation afterward, not one call, not one meeting. Another says people in other cities were told what had happened and were told to disassociate from him. That was the point where the ministry dispute became a property dispute. Angel says that on June 7, 2023, the sheriff told him the Fabens building issue involved shared interests and was a civil matter that would have to go through the justice of the peace. Angel says he chose to wait for that process and kept paying the utilities which he says remained in his name. His position from there is consistent. He says the lease was in his name. He says the other side had broken locks and entered the building at their discretion. He says he would wait for the court instead of retaliating. He also says he had personal money tied up in the Fabens project and rejected the idea that he had no financial stake in it. The other side answered in writing. In the email Angel later posted, attributed to Pastor Stevens, church council, and staff, the El Paso leadership rejects the fraud allegation outright. The email says law enforcement, the insurance company, and the authorities had nothing to pursue because there had been no fraud. It says the church would not walk away from an investment of people, prayer, and finances because of a false accusation. It demands that Angel either turn over the bank account or close it and surrender the funds. And it states plainly, "We will continue to honor the lease and occupy the building." The email also lays out the corporate argument. It says Angel signed the lease as an agent of the Door Gospel Church Incorporated of El Paso, not in a personal capacity, and says the El Paso Church had invested more than $74,000 in Angel and his ministry in the prior year. It warns that refusal to cooperate could lead to further legal action. Angel's written response to that email is just as direct. He says the message came as a surprise because he believed he had already been effectively excommunicated. He wrote, "You have my permission to pursue any legal procedure that you feel you are entitled to. Fear-mongering bears no influence and or burden on me and or my family." He rejects the olive branch language. He says he had already been told he was done, had been gaslighted, and had watched people disassociate from him. He insists his statements were factual, not slander or gossip. He repeats his timeline. Paul first denied wrongdoing, then acknowledged keeping money, then turned the issue into a problem with Angel's heart. Angel also says that if the law could not pursue the matter criminally, that would be because of the statute of limitations, not because the conduct was proper. He says the real way to settle the issue is through Nationwide and the underlying paperwork. He also leaves the door open, at least in theory. He says that if Paul Stevens' name were cleared by Nationwide, and if he chose to remain in the fellowship, he would request restoration to ministry without reprisals. At the same time, he broadens the accusation. He alleges that Paul Stevens had a longer pattern of avoiding accountability and pushing critics out, going back to 1998 with Raul Almazan. That last claim comes from Angel's own account. By then, the building fight had become blunt. In a July 19 text message screenshot, Kofi Solar tells Angel to move on quietly. Says they are not giving him that building, calls Angel's eviction notices delusional, says Angel's name on the lease is where it starts and ends for him, and tells him to back off our property. Then on August 22, in another screenshot, Kofi tells Angel he is trying to help him redeem what is redeemable and urges him to patch the relationship with Pastor. He then warns, "Our actions will hurt you if we carry forward and contact Fabens' high principal, FCA, the IRS, state tax authorities, your misrepresentation to Joe Hankins in his email, etc., etc., etc." The public captions later call those texts threats and blackmail. Whatever label someone uses, the texts themselves show that the dispute had now expanded far beyond the original question about the roof. By the second half of 2023, the conflict was fully public. One set of posts contrasts the allegations against Paul Stevens with his role in a law enforcement appreciation event in El Paso. The photos show him with officers and a plaque that read in part, "The Door Commander Ryan Urrutia, El Paso County Sheriff's Office, in appreciation for your service and willingness to serve community 2023. The point of the caption is obvious. Public respectability on one side, private allegations on the other. The same caption names Ernie Lopez, Richard Contreras, Gabriel and Melissa Ruiz, Kofi Solar, and Juan Baquera as people allegedly implicated by Paul Stevens' decisions. It also alleges disruption of services, illegal possession of the church building, continued occupation after eviction notices, breaking and entering, and more than $7,000 in theft and damage. The legal record itself starts on October 11, 2023, when the landlords, Arturo Pineda Brojas and Micaela Garcia Marquez, filed an eviction petition in Justice of the Peace Precinct 6 against the Door Gospel Church Incorporated, Paul Anthony Stevens, and all occupants. On November 1, JP Court 6 heard and ruled on the matter. The later County Court judgment shows that the Door Gospel Church was the only defendant appellant to file an appeal. It also shows Kofi Solar appearing as a board member of both the Door Gospel Church and its wholly owned subsidiary, the Door Church Fabens Incorporated. The record states that the church paid court costs, a $2,400 appeal bond, and 3 months of rent into the court registry for November 2023, December 2023, and January 2024. totaling $3,600. The appeal was heard on January 30, 2024, in County Court at Law No. 6 in El Paso County. The filed judgment, stamped February 21, 2024, awarded possession to the landlords. It ordered the Door Gospel Church and the Door Church Fabens to return the keys, ordered possession of 313 East Main Street in Fabens returned to the landlords, released the appeal bond and rent from the registry to the plaintiffs and their attorneys, tax costs against the Door Gospel Church, and required the defendants to vacate by 5 p.m. on February 22. It also set any further appeal bond at $30,000. That judgment does not resolve the insurance question, but it does resolve one thing. The building fight went to court, and the church side lost that appeal. The next day, on February 23, 2024, an El Paso County Sheriff's Office incident information card was created for 313 East Main, case number 2024-02741 at 1800 hours. The card lists reporting officers A. Pardo and G. Chavez. By itself, the card does not explain everything that happened, but it was posted alongside CCTV-style images and a photograph of a white pickup truck with several men near the building, and it became part of the family's public case that the conflict did not end quietly, even after the court deadline. The conflict did not end there. After the court ordered the keys returned, Angel Medina went to the police station to try to file charges over what he regarded as the breaking and entering of the Fabens building, along with roughly $7,000 in theft and damage. In that account, the officers were hesitant to take the report, and instead contacted Kofi Solar to let him know Angel was there. The charges were never filed. Angel believed the alleged entry, theft, and property loss still were not being handled through normal legal channels. Another post showed Angel and Ruth's congregation meeting outdoors for 5 months, holding church in the park while locked out of the building. That post was not about the legal issue, it was about continuity. It said in effect that the congregation had lost the building but had not disappeared. By early 2024, the family publicly told their side of the story and then says Angel uncovered illegal activities inside the door, sought answers with integrity, and arranged meetings with Paul Stevens, who eventually confessed to fraud and mishandling funds. It says that when Angel tried to bring the truth forward, he faced blackmail and threats involving his past, his family, and his church. It also alleges wrongful termination in 2 jobs, trespassing, destroyed property, theft, and constant harassment. Another caption says, "The Door Christian Fellowship has bullied my parents for over a year. They broke into their church building, stole, and damaged property. The threats and attempts to blackmail have been going on for too long." The comments under these posts show how the campaign was framed. When someone asked for the full recording behind the crash and burn clip, the reply was that more would be posted later. When someone urged forgiveness and moving on, the reply was that the issue was not bitterness but false doctrine and bad leadership. Another response said they had moved on but still had an obligation to expose sinister cultish inner trappings. Under the post quoting Paul Stevens' scripture comment about not going to law, one commenter said, "Such leaders use that language because they do not want to be held accountable." And the account replied, "If they can sweep it under the rug, they will." So by that point, the fight had fully changed form. It was no longer just an internal dispute about a roof. It had become a public case about leadership, control, retaliation, and whether truth could be dealt with honestly inside the fellowship at all. The case operates on 3 levels at once. First, there's the money question. What exactly did Nationwide pay for? What work was actually done? And what happened to the difference, if there was one? On that point, the case remains unresolved in the record. Second, there's the disciplinary question. What happens inside the door when a pastor raises a financial concern about leadership? On that point, the clips, the written exchange, and Angel's account all point in the same direction. The issue was no longer treated simply as a financial question. It became a question about Angel himself, his heart, his reputation, his loyalty, and the consequences of refusing to back down. Third, there's the institutional question. Who controls the church, the bank account, the lease, the building, and the right to continue in ministry once conflict breaks out? On that point, the email from leadership and the eviction judgment are especially important because they show the institutional position in writing and the eventual outcome in court. Angel Medina and his family clearly understood the sequence as retaliation. In their telling, he raised questions about money, leadership refused outside review, the issue was turned back on him, He was removed from ministry, and the fight then moved into property, legal pressure, and public exposure. The El Paso leadership side clearly denied fraud, asserted corporate authority, and treated Angel's actions as false accusation and disruption. What remains unproven in the record is the full insurance claim, the exact terms of Nationwide's payout, the contractual scope of work, and whether any criminal fraud occurred. What is much easier to see is how the conflict unfolded once Angel pushed the issue. Authority tightened. Reputation became part of the fight. Family consequences were raised. Property became contested. Lawyers and courts entered the picture, and a church dispute that could have been resolved by documentation turned into a much wider struggle over ministry, loyalty, and control. If you have documents, recordings, screenshots, or court records connected to this case, or other cases inside the door, send them my way. My name is Joel Crosby. I am the author of Escaping the Potter's House, an anthology of memoirs by former members. And on this YouTube channel, I examine the history, doctrines, finances, scandals, and internal culture of the Potter's House, also known as The Door, Victory Chapel, Lighthouse, and the wider Christian Fellowship Ministries network, often called The Fellowship. Subscribe if you want more videos like this, and watch the other videos on the channel if you want to learn about the Fellowship's cult dynamics in more detail. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.